Overlooking the city on a tall column stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes, he had 2 bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on the hilt of his sword. "Why can't you be like the Happy Prince?" said a sensible mother to her little boy who was crying for the moon. "The Happy Prince never cries for anything."
"He looks just like an angel,"
said the school children as they walked past the statue in their bright scarlet coats and their clean white dresses. One night a little swallow flew over the city. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks ago, but he had stayed behind, for he was in love with the most beautiful reed.
"Shall I love you?"
said the swallow, who liked to come to the point at once, and the reed made him a low bow.
"This is a ridiculous attachment,"
said the other swallows. Then when autumn came, they all flew away. After they had gone, he felt lonely and began to tire of his lady love.
"Will you come away with me?"
he said finally to her, but the reed shook her head. She was so attached to her home.
"You have been trifling with me,"
he cried.
"I am off the pyramids. Goodbye."
And he flew away. All day long he flew, and at night time he arrived at the city.
"Where shall I stay?"
he said.
"I hope the town has made preparations."
Then he saw the statue on the tall column.
"I will stay there,"
he cried.
"It's a fine place, with plenty of fresh air. I have a golden bedroom,"
he said softly to himself. As he looked around, just as he was putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him.
"What a curious thing,"
he cried. Then another drop fell, and he decided to fly away. But before he had opened his wings, a third drop fell, and he looked up. He saw that the eyes of the Happy Prince were filled with tears, and the tears were running down his golden cheeks. The little swallow was filled with pity.
"Who are you?"
he asked.
"I am the Happy Prince." "Why are you weeping then?"
asked the swallow.
"When I was alive and had a human heart,"
answered the statue,
"I did not know about tears. I lived in the palace of Sansuki, where sorrow is not allowed to enter. Now they have placed me up here so high that I can see all the ugliness and all the misery of my city. My heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep." "Far away,"
continued the statue in a low musical voice.
"Far away in a little street, there is a poor woman's house. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman seated at the table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has coarse red hands and all pricked by the needle, because she is seamstress. In a bed in the corner of the room, her little boy is lying ill. His mother has nothing to give him but water, so he is crying. Little swallow, will you not take her the ruby on the hilt of my sword? My friends are waiting for me in Egypt,"
said the swallow.
"Swallow, swallow, little swallow,"
said the prince,
"will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger? The boy is so thirsty, and the mother so sad." "I don't think I like boys,"
answered the swallow.
"Last summer, near the river, there were 2 rude boys who were always throwing stones at me."
But the Happy Prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry.
"It is very cold here,"
he said,
"but I will stay with you for one night and be your messenger." "Thank you, little swallow,"
said the prince. So the swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it over the roofs of the town. He passed by the palace and heard the sound of dancing. A beautiful girl came out on the balcony. "I hope my dress will be ready in time for the dance," she said. "I have ordered flowers to be embroidered on it, but the seamstresses are so lazy." At last he came to the poor woman's house and looked in. The boy was tossing feverishly on his bed, and the mother was so tired she had fallen asleep. In he hopped and laid the great ruby on the table beside the boy's bed. Then he flew gently round the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings.
"How could I feel?"
said the boy.
"I must be getting better."
And he sank into a delicious slumber. Then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done.
"It is curious,"
he remarked,
"but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold." "That is because you have done a good deed,"
said the prince. When day broke, the swallow flew down to the river and had a bath.
"What a remarkable phenomenon,"
said the professor of ornithology as he was passing over the bridge.
"A swallow in winter."
And he wrote a long letter about it to the local newspaper. Everyone talked about it, thought it was full of words that they could not understand.
"Tonight I will go to Egypt,"
said the swallow, and he was in high spirits at the prospect. He visited all the public monuments and sat for a long time on top of the church steeple. Wherever he went, the sparrows chirruped and said to each other,
"What a distinguished stranger!"
So he enjoyed himself very much. When the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince.
"Have you any work that I can do for you in Egypt?"
he cried.
"I am just starting." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow,"
said the prince.
"Far away across the city, I see a young man in the garret. He is leaning over a desk covered with papers, and in a tumbler by his side there is a bunch of withered violets. He is trying to finish a play for the director of the theatre, but he is too cold to write any more. There is no fire in the garret, and hunger has made him faint. I will wait with you one night longer,"
said the swallow, who really had a good heart.
"Alas, I have no ruby now,"
said the prince.
"My eyes are all that I have left. They are made up of rare sapphires, which were brought from India 1,000 years ago. Pluck out one of them and take it to him." "Dear prince,"
said the swallow,
"I cannot do that."
And he began to weep.
"Swallow, swallow, little swallow,"
said the prince,
"do as I command you."
So the swallow plucked out one eye of the prince and flew away to the young man's garret. The young man had his head buried in his hands, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. When he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violets. The next day, the swallow flew down to the harbour.
"I am going to Egypt,"
he cried, but nobody minded, and when the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince.
"I have come to bid you goodbye,"
he cried.
"Swallow, swallow, little swallow,"
said the prince,
"will you not stay with me one night longer?" "It is winter,"
answered the swallow,
"and the chill snow will soon be here. In Egypt, the sun is warm on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lie in the mud and look lazily about them. Dear prince, I must leave you, but I will never forget you. Next spring, I will bring you 2 beautiful jewels in place of those you have given away. In the square below,"
said the happy prince,
"there stands a little match girl, selling matches. Her matches have fallen in the gutter, and they are all spoiled. Her father will scold her if she does not bring home some money, and she is crying. Pluck out my other eye, and give it to her, and her father will not scold her. I will stay with you one night longer, but I cannot pluck out your eye. You would be completely blind then. Swallow, swallow, little swallow,"
said the prince.
"do as I command you."
So he plucked out the prince's other eye and flew down with it. He swooped past the match girl. He dropped the jewel into the palm of her hand, and she ran home laughing. Then the swallow came back to the prince.
"You are blind now,"
he said,
so I will stay with you always.
All the next day he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what he had seen in strange lands.
"Dear little swallow," said the prince, "you tell me the marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and of women.
Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there."
So the swallow flew over the great city and saw the rich making merry in their beautiful houses, while the beggars were sitting at the gates. Under a bridge, two little boys were lying in one another's arms to try and keep themselves warm. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen.
"I am covered with fine gold,"
said the prince.
"You must take it off, leaf by leaf, and give it the poor."
Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow gave to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played games in the street. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. Everybody went about in furs, and the little boys wore caps and skated on ice. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. Finally he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more.
"Goodbye, dear prince,"
he murmured.
"I'm glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow,"
said the prince.
"It is not to Egypt that I am going,"
said the swallow.
"I am going to the house of death."
And he kissed the happy prince and fell down dead at his feet. At that moment a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the lead heart had snapped right in two. Early the next morning, the mayor was walking in the square below with the town councillors. As they passed the column, he looked up at the statue.
"How shabby the happy prince looks,"
he said.
"and there is actually a dead bird at his feet,"
continued the mayor.
"We must really issue a proclamation that birds are not to be allowed to die here."
So they pulled down the statue of the happy prince. Then they melted the statue in a furnace, and the mayor held a meeting to decide what was to be done with the metal.
"What a strange thing,"
said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry.
"This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace."
So they threw it on a dust heap, where the dead swallow was also lying.
"Bring me the two most precious things in the city,"
said God to one of his angels, and the angel brought him the lead heart and the dead bird.
"You have rightly chosen,"
said God,
"for in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing for evermore, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me."